Hey, welcome to BreitWerks. What are you looking at? You are looking at an axle for a 1974. Yes, this is Persephone, the beautiful Sportomatic. So, why am I showing you this? So, some of you in the SC world, the Turbo world, the Carrera world, you have converted everything over to the end-capped axles. These are old school. There is no end cap on them. You have to put a gasket on there, which sounds simple, but if you don't use the right gasket, if you don't do it correctly, you will get grease everywhere. I don't know why GKN ships brand new axles in a box that's twice their size so that they can move around. In the olden days, they used to have these things strapped down. It was all very fancy. Now you get it and there's grease everywhere. But fortunately, they overfill them, so it's not a problem. All right, we are going to get on with it. We're going to get this guy installed on the passenger side. All right, so we've got passenger side. Now, what's neat about these is they only have 4 bolts, and they have 2 pins, right? 2 roll pins. So you got to figure out where your roll pins go. Hopefully, you can see that in the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock area, those holes are not threaded. And the same thing up here, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock area, they are threaded. And I just set them to 3 and 9 so that I know where they are when I'm trying to situate the axle. You could go up, down, you can put them anywhere you want, but they don't have threads, so you gotta be careful about that. And when you come over to the actual axle itself, they come with the roll pins installed. So you have, trust me, there's one on the bottom. We're gonna try and stay out of the axle grease mess here. But yeah, we're gonna get after it, see what we can do. So back in the olden days, pre-FB, pre-Facebook, Pelican Parts forums were the place to go. And they were littered with guys talking about, oh, my axle bolt's backed out, my axle bolt's backed out. Well, these are the M10s, right? So there's 4 bolts per CV joint. And one of the things that we do is we upgrade them to Schnorr washers. And I call it an upgrade. Porsche kind of used those on most of the cars, but they're little serrated and they have a little conical shape to them. So they actually will mechanically bite in on both sides. Now this car had like 2 Schnorr washers and it had all of these. And these are split washers, which split washers would be fine except these are 12-9 bolts, so they get torqued to 60 foot-pounds. And you can see these aren't hardened washers because this one just opened up. So it wasn't even doing its job anymore. So we're not going to go the split axle or the split washer route on these axles. We're going to actually just throw those in the trash and we're going to upgrade to these Schnorr washers. Now, if you're thinking about doing the same thing, be careful. There are 2 different versions of Schnorr washers. One's very cheap and one's very expensive. And you can imagine these are the very expensive ones because they're hardened steel. And I have tried to go the cheap route and they just crack. They will literally crack in 3 places as you're applying the torque. So you've got to use the hardened ones, a little bit of an upgrade. We get them, I keep them in stock. And then the other thing is the seal. Now you'll notice this is an outside seal. There's 2 versions of the seal. One that goes inside the bolt holes and one that goes outside. So on this particular axle, we're using the outside seals. In my opinion, these are a little easier to install. They're also a little bit better at keeping the grease inside the axle. And you can actually install the inside ones, but the bolt hole doesn't line up quite perfectly. So if you got the small ones and they're not lining up perfectly, save yourself a headache and just order the right parts. Pelican has them. Maybe Pelican has them. I'm not sure. I think I got these from Porsche. But that's what we're going to do. So each one of these bolts gets a Schnorr, S-C-H-N-O-R-R, Schnorr washer first, and then the, I forget what the technical term of this is, but basically a big washer. So they go on just like that. And depending on some of them where you can see it already bit in, I'll actually still use that side. Some guys flip them over, but this one looks like they used both sides anyway. But I'll use that side because it's already had some of its plating taken away, so we might as well just put the washer right over the top of it, and it'll bite in and you won't ever have to worry about it. But since these are the big M10 bolts, they get 60 foot-pounds. And that doesn't sound like a lot until you're holding a tiny little tire trying to put 60 foot-pounds on this bolt, right? It uses an 8mm Allen bit. So we are going to put these guys on the outsides of the axle, and ironically, they're a grease seal, but you use a little grease and it'll stick to the CV joint because you need it to stick to the CV joint as you're whacking everything up there into place. So that's what we're going to do next, and then we'll come back to you. All right, so for the process, guys, yes, this may look like a little caveman style, like why are you working inside the box over a trash can? Because that shit gets everywhere and it's a pain to clean up. So I'm trying to keep the mess inside the mess. But what we've done here from a process perspective, right? The gasket will go over the 2 roll pins and it'll sort of hold itself into place. If you add 1 bolt, right? I've added 1 bolt to each side with its clamping plate. If you add 1 bolt, it not only holds the gasket in place, but it allows you to also start to tighten it up so that the axle won't fall on your head while you're going and grabbing other parts. So when we install these, we actually have 1 bolt already loaded. Some people put all the bolts in, but I just find that to be cumbersome. So we're gonna get on with it. All right, guys, the in-process video did not work very well, but what we're gonna do now is we're gonna torque these guys down, and your easiest access point is down here on the bottom. That way the bellows kind of gets out of your way too. And we're gonna take these to 60 foot-pounds, which is a tremendous amount. Oh, Jason, why don't you set the e-brake? Because then you gotta move it over and over again. All right, that's 1. Two. I think axles are such a bitch to do because it's the last step before you get to drive the car, and the car knows it. And it's like, oh, you're gonna earn this, pal. 3. 4. And these guys all get retorqued after the 50-mile mark. So I'm not worried about going around twice. Already done that a couple of times. There's 1. 2. 3. Boy, 60 foot-pounds doesn't seem like a lot until you're trying to hold the tire and balance the torque wrench. 4. All right, look at that. Now, let's check it out. So as you're installing these, a tremendous amount of grease will come out between the drive flange and the CV joint, right? So you get your nice gasket here, no squeeze out, everything's flush. But that took a bottle of brake clean to get it to that point. So make sure you buy a bottle of brake clean, or 2, 1 for each axle. And then the other piece of information you might want to know, make sure you buy 5 or 6 of the axle seals, because one of them will rip. That's an almost guarantee. So when you're doing your project, make sure you've got a spare. All right, well, hey, that's it. We've got axles, and we may be ready for a first drive here soon. So thanks for checking it out, following along. And one day I'll figure out how to get you guys more involved in the process. I know that a lot of people have been messaging me about that, but very hard to do. So we'll work on it. Have a fantastic day and check us out at BreitWerks.com.